It is recorded that the great river Andun bore the fellowship ever southward, and the world about them grew strangely quiet. For many days they had paddled on, through lands that had grown empty and wild. The old kingdoms of the north were fallen into memory, the roads were broken, the watchtowers stood silent. And then, as they rounded a great bend in the river, a cry was heard.
It was the voice of Aragorn, son of Arathorn, and as one, all eyes followed his pointing hand. From the deep waters they rose, two vast statues, carved from the living rock of the cliffs that flank the river. They were fashioned in the likeness of ancient kings, wrought on a scale beyond anything the hobbits had ever dreamed. Each stood upon a mighty pedestal, its left hand raised in a gesture of warning, its right hand bearing an axe. Their faces, stern and majestic, gazed ever northward with an expression of eternal vigilance. The company, drifting in their small boats, felt suddenly humbled, not merely in stature, but in time itself.
For these sentinels of stone had stood watch for nearly 2,000 years, guarding the northern border of a kingdom that had once stretched from these falls all the way to the Bay of Belfalas. The Argonath stood as a threshold, a boundary that proclaimed to all who passed, "Here begins the realm of Gondor." We shall now turn to the history of these places, the Argonath, Amon Hen, and Parth Galen, the northern marches of ancient Gondor, raised in defiance of shadow and of time, standing still in the kingdom's long gray twilight.
To truly comprehend the making of the Argonath, and, indeed, the seat of seeing, we must look back beyond Gondor, beyond even the memory of Númenor, to the eldest days of the world. For the great craft of the Dunedain did not spring from nothing. It was an inheritance, passed down through the long ages, perhaps diminished at each passage, but never wholly lost.
The immediate source of this great skill was, of course, the island kingdom of Númenor, a gift to the fathers of men after the War of Wrath. There, they raised Armanelos the Golden, the fairest city of men that ever was, and their mastery of stone was without peer among the mortal races. Thus, the great works of Gondor that we see were but a memory, a lingering echo of that lost and drowned splendor.
Yet the Númenorians themselves had been pupils. Their profound lore was learned from the Eldar, the elves, with whom they were allied in the great wars against Morgoth in Beleriand. It was the Noldor, the Deep Elves, who taught the Edain what they would of the shaping of stone and the raising of towers, a knowledge born in the undying lands themselves.
And here we find the uttermost source. For the Noldor had looked upon the light of Valinor before the sun and moon were ever made. They had seen the two trees, Telperion and Laurelin, and something of that divine light passed forever into their works. And so it is that in the stone of the Argonath there is a memory of Gondolin. In their power, an echo of the Noldoran desire to see far-off things, to pierce the very veils of distance and of time.
This very desire is woven into the fabric of elvish history. The Silmarils themselves were made to capture and preserve the light of the trees. The Palantiri, the seeing stones, were crafted in Valinor that the elves might look across the sundering seas. So when the Dunedain built the seat of seeing on Amon Hen, they were reaching for this same ancient power, a most noble purpose that, in a darkened world, would carry with it a terrible risk.
Now, the cataclysm that brought this ancient craft to the shores of Middle-earth was a tragedy born of pride and shadow. The very skill that had raised the gleaming towers of Númenor was turned, in the end, to rebellion, and its end was in darkness and the deep sea.
The Númenorians, corrupted by the whispers of Sauron, attempted to assail Valinor itself, and in response, Ilúvatar, the One, broke the world. The island sank, but not all perished. The faithful, those who had rejected Sauron's lies, escaped upon 9 ships, bearing with them the treasures of their people. Led by Elendil and his sons, Isildur and Anarion, they founded 2 kingdoms in exile, Arnor in the north and Gondor in the south.
The great works of early Gondor, the towers of Minas Ithil and Minas Anor, the great halls of Osgiliath, and later the Argonath themselves, were not merely practical constructions. They were powerful acts of defiance against the downfall. By raising such heights of stone, the Dunedain sought to proclaim, "We are still the men of the West." The raised hands of the Argonath echoed the ban of the Valar, the very prohibition their own ancestors had so disastrously violated. The gesture itself says, "Here is a boundary. Here is a line that shall not be crossed."
Mark well the weight of ages that separates these events. Gondor was founded in the last days of the Second Age.
And yet, as this timeline shows, the Argonath themselves were not built until more than a millennia had passed in the Third Age. And from their construction, nearly 1,800 more years would pass before the small boats of the Fellowship drifted into their shadow. They were entering a kingdom whose memory was deeper than the river itself. Let us turn now to the land itself, to the northern marshes where these monuments stood. Beyond the Argonath lay Nen Hithoel, the lake of pale water, a long, oval body held by the hills at its southern end. Here, the sons of Elendil recognized the great strategic importance of the land, and with their ancient skill, they enhanced what nature had already provided.
On the western shore of the lake rose Aman Hen, the hill of sight. Upon the eastern shore rose Aman La, the hill of hearing. Between them, at the head of the great falls of Rhoros, lay the sheer-sided island of Tolbrander. And at the foot of Aman Hen was Parth Gallen, the green lawn that served as a landing place above the cataracts. This geography, you see, formed a natural and most formidable defensive complex.
The two hills were not alike in their purpose. Upon Aman Hen, the men of Gondor built the Seat of Seeing, a high place from which a watcher might see far beyond the limits of ordinary sight. Its twin, Aman La, was devoted to hearing, possessing a complementary power to detect the approach of armies or the signals of allies. Together, the Hill of the Eye and the Hill of the Ear formed a comprehensive observation system for the northern frontier.
The chronicles record that the Argonath were raised in the year 1248 of the Third Age by the command of Minnecar, who would later rule as King Romandasil II. He chose to honor the founders Isildur and Anarion, depicting them with axes in hand, not merely weapons of war but tools of building, symbolizing the hewing of a civilization from the wilderness. After more than 17 centuries of wind and river rain, their features were weathered, and yet their power remained utterly undiminished. It is worth asking why the great crisis of the Fellowship occurred precisely here, at this ancient threshold. The answer, I believe, lies in the nature of the place itself. It was a boundary between the wild and the realm of the star, a place of endings and of beginnings, where the long river journey ceased and a new path had to be chosen. Here, at the feet of the ancient kings, the question could no longer be delayed. Where now? They had come to a crossroads, both literal and figurative. The falls of Rhoros blocked their path southward by river. They must now choose, east toward Mordor or west toward Minas Tirith. But while Aragorn delayed, seeking counsel, the temptation of the ring, which had been gnawing at the heart of Boromir of Gondor, finally broke his resistance. Fleeing from Boromir's sudden madness, Frodo cast the ring upon his finger and climbed to the very summit of Aman Hen. There he sat in the Seat of Seeing, and for a moment its ancient power was revealed to him in a rush of visions. He saw far-off lands, the movements of armies, the gathering of war. The seat, built for vigilance, fulfilled its purpose, laying bare the state of the world to his gaze.
But all such powers carry peril in a fallen world. As Frodo gazed out, he became aware that another eye was gazing back. The ancient malice of Sauron, called Gorthaur the Cruel in the Elder Days, reached through the very device that was built to oppose him. The Seat of Seeing, intended as a watchtower, had become a beacon. Frodo barely escaped, tearing the ring from his finger, just as the will of the Dark Tower bent fully upon him.
And while Frodo fled the Eye, the Fellowship broke apart in chaos. Boromir fell, redeeming himself in combat. Merry and Pippin were captured by orcs. Aragorn set off in pursuit, and Samwise found Frodo, to accompany him to Mordor. By any reasonable measure, this was a disaster, a total victory for the Shadow, and yet it was not so.
Through what seemed to be chance, though the wise might call it providence, the scattering of the Fellowship achieved what no single plan ever could have. This is a eucatastrophe, the sudden, joyous turn from despair to unlooked-for hope that lies at the very heart of the great tales. The apparent defeat was transformed into the very means of victory.
Each thread of this unraveling was woven into a new and stronger tapestry. Boromir died in honor, absolved. The capture of Merry and Pippin led directly to the rousing of the Ents and the destruction of Isengard. The pursuit of the three hunters brought Aragorn to Rohan, where he helped turn the tide of war. And Frodo and Sam, alone and unlooked for, found the only path by which the quest could have possibly succeeded, a secret way, shrouded in stealth. And so it was, at the threshold of the realm of the star, at the feet of the ancient kings, where the waters of Anduin fell into the abyss. The Fellowship ended,
but the quest endured. The monuments of stone remained, silent witnesses to that fateful day, to the breaking, the parting, and the beginning of the many roads that led, at last, to the fire and to the fall of the shadow.
The Argonauts still stand, so far as any tale tells. They remind us that the world is old, and that memory is set deep not only in books, but in the earth itself. The past is never truly gone. It waits in the weathered rock and the quiet streams for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. For if stone can hold such a memory, what tales of our own fading and renewal might our own landscapes tell, should we but learn how to read them?